Well, what if you're God and you come here to this incredible place you created called planet Earth, and you walk up to one of your creations and you say, hey, creation, how you liking this thing I created for you? And the person says, God, I'm glad you showed up because I got a bone to pick with you. I mean, first of all, why do you make it so effing hot all the time?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that's the bone I'd pick with God. Seems a bit trivial, a bit sheltered, you know.
And then you make these stupid people that get in my way and interfere with what I'm trying to accomplish.
I also probably wouldn't bring up Jehovah's Witnesses.
And you make these little red ants, and they bite my ass.
And 3 for 3, I wouldn't bring up the mild inconvenience of ants biting my arse. No, I'd bring up deeper issues. Think the Black Plague, parasitic diseases, famine, and all the animals that have gone the way of the dodo. You know, the kind of suffering that shakes the very foundations of one's belief in a benevolent God.
So I tell people, say there is no God. I say there's God. You're just bitching so much, he doesn't want to hang out with you.
Alright, what's going on? The author, coach, and speaker, Tony Robbins, recently appeared on the George Lanko podcast, and within their discussion, Tony trivialized the profound philosophical problem of evil into a petty squabble with a deity over minor annoyances. This is, unfortunately, a frequent occurrence from theists, and so it serves as a great opportunity to offer a response. And that is precisely what we're going to do. The stage, Tony, is all yours.
Well, what if you're God and you come here to this incredible place you created called planet Earth, and you walk up to one of your creations and you say, hey, creation, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, how you liking this thing I created for you?
So Tony has set up a scenario where God personally visits one of his creations to ask if they like his world.
How you liking this thing I created for you?
But considering that he's going to go on to lambast atheists, his framing is completely off. He's painting a scenario in which it's obvious that God exists. He's got God speaking to us, even. So the atheist isn't actually an atheist under this scenario, but rather an angry theist. And in case you're interested, and you should be, Reese and I recently responded to this view on low fruit. But the point being here is that Tony is off to a bad start.
And the person says, God, I'm glad you showed up because I got a bone to pick with you. I mean, first of all, why do you make it so effing hot all the time?
Really, Tony? Is that the most pressing question we'd have for God? The warm temperature that's melting our pumpkin spiced iced latte? Coming from England, I'd actually be bitching about the rain, but putting that aside, if I were to call into question the weather, I'd be more inclined to ask about the devastating forest fires ravaging our planet, the droughts that cause famines, and the hurricanes and tornadoes that tear through ecosystems. You know, the kind that have been destroying lives long before humans ever set foot on Earth. These aren't just mild, inconvenient weather patterns, they're chaotic catastrophes that stand, at least on the surface, as to contradict the very notion of a benevolent overseer.
I mean, you could have made it 72 degrees year-round here. I mean, it's insane.
I appreciate that Tony is being facetious here, but his straw man of the problem of evil is, at best, incredibly naive. I mean, how sheltered must you be to trivialise the impact a few degrees can have on wildlife, let alone ignore the more destructive weather patterns we face? Tony lives in the higher echelons of society, in a first world country with largely comfortable weather, and yet he forgets that most of the world doesn't have this privilege. Huge parts of the planet are hostile to life, where people must struggle day to day to receive the most basics of food, shelter, and water. Basically, Tony has failed to grasp the gravity of the problem of evil by reducing it to a matter of mere comfort. The real insanity isn't the temperature, it's the seemingly random and often cruel nature of our world.
And then you make these stupid people that get in my way and interfere with what I'm trying to accomplish. Why wouldn't you make everybody nice and connected?
Tony's almost touching upon something substantial, but again he's undercut its severity. Why is there so much conflict, hatred, and division among us? If we were really created by an all-loving God, why wouldn't we be instilled with a natural inclination towards harmony and empathy? It's not just about people getting in our way or not being nice. It's about deep-rooted issues like systemic injustice, discrimination, and violence that have plagued humanity for millennia. Why has God created humans with such issues as psychopathy? Why make some people attracted to minors? Tony's simplification overlooks completely the deeper, more distressing aspects of the problem.
And you make these little red ants, and they bite my ass. I mean, why would you create such a thing if you're God?
Again, does Tony really think that we'd ask God about these tiny red ants? No, if we were to speak about insects, we'd probably bring up something more consequential, like malaria from mosquitoes. Let's put this into perspective with some staggering statistics. In 2019 alone, there were an estimated 229 million cases of malaria worldwide. The most heartbreaking part? Over 400,000 deaths, with children under the age of 5 being the most vulnerable group, accounting for about 67% of those deaths. So, the real question we should be asking isn't about the annoyance of these ant bites, but rather, why did over 250,000 children have to die from this awful disease that you, God, supposedly made? It's a grim thought, but unlike Tony's inconsequential ants, mosquitoes drive home the point. We're not talking about minor inconveniences here. We're talking about life and death situations that have plagued humanity for millennia. Situations that, if God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent, are very difficult to reconcile with the existence of such a deity. It's these kinds of profound and troubling questions that truly challenge the concept of a loving and all-powerful creator. The more we study the world we live in, the more we know, the harder it becomes to believe in such a God.
And then God goes to one of his other creations and says, how are you liking this place? And they say, oh, God, thank God you're here. I've always wanted to thank you directly. This is the most amazing paradise. It's so unbelievable.
Notice that this contrast Tony presents only makes sense within his oversimplified version of the problem of evil. On the one hand, we have someone complaining about minor annoyances, and on the other hand, someone expressing gratitude for those same annoyances as if they're soul building. But no one suffering significant hardship would actually say, "Thank you, God, for having one of my children die from leukemia, another from malaria, and paralysing me after having an earthquake collapse my house upon me." That's just unrealistic. It's a gross oversimplification of human suffering and gratitude. In reality, the person might be open to a response from God, but they certainly wouldn't be thankful for the tragedies that befall them. Why must they face such harsh soul building, while Tony only has to experience slightly inconvenient heat? Human resilience and gratitude are complex, definitely, that's true. And yes, many find strength and even thankfulness through their struggles, but this doesn't negate the pain and suffering they've endured, nor does it trivialize their legitimate questions about the nature of a deity who would allow for such suffering. What Tony misses here is the depth of the human experience, the nuanced ways in which people reconcile suffering with faith or struggle with the absence of it. The real theological and philosophical challenge is understanding how such extremes of suffering and joy can coexist in a world supposedly created by an all-loving, all-powerful deity. This isn't a simple matter of comparing perspectives on minor annoyances. It's about grappling with the profound complexities of human life, suffering, and belief.
First of all, you never get bored because you're always changing the temperature. It's so amazing.
Again, Tony's approach only holds water when we're dealing with his dismissive examples. Take, for instance, the Australian bushfires that ravaged the country and led to catastrophic losses. It's impossible to frame this as entertaining when considering the countless koalas and other wildlife that perished, not to mention the immense loss of habitat, the toll on human life and property, and the long-term ecological damage. These aren't just temperature changes, they're environmental disasters. They highlight a more serious aspect of the problem of evil, the suffering of innocent creatures and the destruction of nature, which seem at odds with the idea of a benevolent and omnipotent creator.
You bring so many people to challenge me to grow.
You wouldn't say thank you, Tony, for the mugger that stabbed you for your wallet, would you? And you wouldn't thank God for the terrorists that blew up a concert, would you?
And you made these little red ants. Man, these things are courageous. They're 1/1,000,000th my size and they bite my ass. It's amazing.
And would you thank God for the courage of the viper whose venom cripples your child? Come on, man. This is such an insane straw man.
It's amazing. Now the question is, if you were God, who do you want to hang out with, the first person or the second one?
Wow.
Wow, indeed. It's clear, is it not, that Tony, in addition to strawmanning the problem of evil, has inadvertently portrayed a version of God that is both petty and dismissive. When he asks, who do you hang out with, the first person or the second person, he's framing God as choosing between those who complain and those who are blindly grateful. Tony's argument entails that only the oblivious can sit at God's table. So I guess ignorance really is bliss. The real question, of course, isn't about who God would choose to spend time with. It's about how an all-loving, omniscient deity can be reconciled with the existence of extreme suffering and evil in the world.
Wow.
So I tell people, say there is no God. I said, there's God. You're just bitching so much, he doesn't want to hang out with you.
George and his team seem pretty impressed by Tony here, but man, does this paint their God as a colossal arsehole or what? And you know what? It also paints Tony out as a colossal arsehole too. His perspective, while perhaps intended to be light-hearted or thought-provoking, actually highlights a rather sheltered and insensitive view. To diminish the overwhelming suffering in the world is to ignore the real pain, struggle and questioning that many people endure. Tony has described a God that is more concerned about brown-nosing than it is about the harm it causes to its creation.
You're just bitching so much, he doesn't want to hang out with you.
So, rather than bitching, like, subscribe, and if you can, please become a patron. We could really do with the help. Thanks.